Bonjour Watcher, this is Jordan45 and welcome back to the Fruit of Grisaia. In the last episode, we play a long game. Let's continue where we left off. Last day 2. Sitting on my bed, I murmured those words to myself. I finally managed to return to that home, but my mother wasn't with me. All I had there was a false artificial welcome from the man who had broken her. But I simply resumed the same numb, miserable life in a different setting. Staring up at the ceiling, I could feel the familiar bad sludge growing thick inside my chest. I fought down the crushing feelings of despair as best I could, closed my eyes and fell asleep. That's fast. The next day, my father had arranged beforehand for my transfer to an all-girls school some 20 minutes from the mansion by car. It was a very prestigious institution. I actually recognized the name. I felt badly out of place, uncomfortable with my new uniform and the beautiful school building. I could hear the whisper from all sides. Entering the classroom, I sat quietly and I opened the desk as far from the others as possible. There was an improvement in one regard. The talk about me wasn't particularly cruel or hostile. But essentially, I was treated just like before. My classmates interact with me in a business-like way when necessary, and otherwise largely pretend I wasn't there. A school full of young ladies from upper-class families was surprisingly uncomfortable in its own way. Having completed my formulated introduction in the first day of classes, I found myself distinctly heading to the rooftop. After gazing out for a moment, I settled down against a concrete support near the edge of the roof and took out my sketchbook. I began to draw the sky above me. A simple pencil hatchet rendering the clouds and skies in shade of grey. That afternoon I couldn't stand to look at the world. Anything my eyes settled on repulsed me. The empty sky was the only thing I could bring myself to observe calmly. The driver had opened the front door to the house for me. I was delivered to school and back. I didn't even have to open my own doors anymore. The extreme courtesy only intensified my discomfort. The household employees greeted me with smiles so soft and mild it was slightly nauseating. When I answered with a brief nod, they began to bombard me with words in rapid succession. Their tongue eager and openly professional.
Yumiko-sama, 何か召し上がりますか? いえ、結構です。部屋へ戻ります。では、何かお飲み物をお持ちしましょうか。それも結構です。喉は渇いておりませんから。
それでは、何かありましたらお申し付けください。
はい。
Climbing slowly out the stairs, I have a heavy sigh. Would they be putting on that sort of show every single day from now on? Their difference was so transparently artificial that it was painful rather than flattering. Sorry. Given my current position, it just might be possible to order them to stop acting like that. But I didn't know what repercussions that they would have, especially if they were to report it to my father. I ended up deciding it's best not to make waves at such an early stage. I've been able to postpone it for one day with excuse about my fetish, but the time had come.
久しぶりだね。こうして由美子と食事をとるのは。
A glass of wine in one hand, my father turns a radiant smile on me. Inside my head, I spat out the words, "It's the first time." From the moment I sat down in front of that luxurious dinner and my beaming father, I was immediately filled with a desperate longing to flee. I tried a little to salt the duck on my plate just to kill a few seconds. It seemed strangely tasteless and without texture.
学園の先生から褒められたよ。転入する際の成績が抜群だったとね。これなら学校間のレベル差はほとんど関係ないとのことだった。
My father, still maintaining the same cheerful tone as the night before, complimented me at great length. All I could manage was to nod and mechanically shovel the food placed in front of me into my mouth. Courses after course, and I couldn't taste a thing. I didn't even put any salt on this. It was like eating hunks of rubber. Carrying things to my mouth solely for the sake of chewing on them didn't make for a pleasant dinner. Especially pleasant dinner experience. Gradually, I began to ignore my plate in favor of frequent sips of water. The tasteless food, Dad's barrage of phrases and myself sitting there passively just accepting it all. Everything about the scene made me sick. My emotions only grew darker with every passing minute. This was all some bizarre whim of my father's. That would be a meaningless ceremony he was carrying out in pursuit of some hidden objective. What else could it be? Could it possibly be?
ユミコ、髪はずっと伸ばしているのか？
Oh, the hair time. I felt my breath catch in my throat. She did cut her hair once. Then summer day, the day when the heat had poured down on me like a rain of molten iron. The moment when I had crawled at my chest and hacked at my own hair in a spam of self-loathing, it all came floating vividly back.
はい。
I almost told him that I do cut it short once. But what would be the point explaining that to this man? It will only throw him little place into chaos. What on earth did my father mean by asking me a question like that? Why bringing out the very thing that had always marked me as worthless?
そうか。とてもよく似合ってるよ。
My father, a smile on his face, spoke those words in a casual tone of voice. And she's vomit.
ユミコ。
すみません。
Rising from my seat, I ran out of the room, both hands pressed tightly across my mouth.
おい、何か体に合わないものがあったんじゃないのか？
Oh, and he angry. Serve you right, servants. I could hear my father snarling at someone behind me, but I didn't have time to be worried about that. As it burned my mouth as I vomited the tasteless food out into the toilet bowl. None of it had the slightest flavor going down, but coming back up it was powerfully unpleasant. It seems a bit unfair somehow.
何を勝手なこと。
Wasn't my sex the entire reason he cast mom aside? What on earth was my father thinking? How could he say that? Why? He never even looked at me before. This had to be some kind of whim. He decided to play house for a while to appease his guilty conscience. Either that or he needed to do for some more work-related reason.
ここもひどい。
How long would it take before I could find a safe haven? This was no better than living with my grandparents. No, in the countryside, at least I wasn't expected to do anything. There were expectations of me here that made it even more agonizing.
何もしたくないのに。
Tasting the acid rising once more from the depth of my throat, I descended into self-pity. I would truly have preferred to shut myself in a dark ship, to reject the world and do nothing at all for the rest of my life. But so long as I needed food to eat and a bed to sleep in, I had no choice but to play along with my father's momentary kindness. The thought triggered a new wave of nausea. So she stayed with her father for a while, I guess. 1 week passed. People often say that time flies when you're having fun, but it's true because those first 7 days seem to last a century. Hanging my bag next to my desk, I pulled out my notes and textbooks. I was as isolated and out as blessed as ever in my new school. I'd been studying a good deal, but that was simply my way of killing the vast stretches of otherwise painfully empty time I spent here. It's really as nothing to do with my father's place. I had a sketch for a few days now. For one thing, the weather had been dull and grey, so I couldn't look up without remembering that day. That just had me in the mood in the first place. Even if I opened my sketchbook today, I only end up with another drawing of the sky, as if I didn't have enough of those already. Those speculatively self-mocking thoughts stopped me on the way up to the roof, redirecting my path down to the lower floor. My life was a steady line from one meaningless moment to the next. Identical day trickled by. But there was one thing that had begun to change in the course of that week. Human beings are frighteningly adaptable creatures. The meals with my father that had at first repulsed me to the point of vomiting were gradually growing tolerable. Sometimes I hated myself for that. But little by little, I was coming to understand that it wasn't just a result of my mind acclimatizing itself to the situation.
ユミコ、学校には慣れたか？
はい。
いきなりの転校で戸惑ったかもしれんが、すぐに友達もできる。お父さんの時もだな。
My father was making a genuine effort. With gentle advice and anecdotes about his own experience, he tried to reassure me. Apparently, Dad had gone through many transfers in his study years and always struggled with how to present himself to the new classmates. I was beginning to learn a number of surprising personal things about my father as he persistently tried to draw me into conversation.
ああ、そうか。今は時代も違うだろうからな。すまなかったな、ユミコ。
いいえ。
And he wasn't pushy or arrogant about it. He always seems to be considering my point of view. Just as I heard, Dad was on an extreme tight schedule. Even when he returned home, it was extremely rare for him to stay overnight. More frequently, he would return to his company immediately after dinner. But that also meant he was coming home solely to share a meal with me. I gradually grew less pricky and slightly more communicative. By now, I could eat a dinner with him without a hint of queasiness.
どうしたユミコ？
いえ、なんでも。
Just as something was about to spill out from my mouth, Mom's pale, empty flash has flashed before my eyes. Mom's pale, empty face. I suddenly remind myself this man is responsible for my mother's suffering. That fundamental resentment has a fate. I wouldn't let it fade. Now I understand why she hated her father. Lying in the bed in my darkening room, I thought things over. I was no less uncertain that when I first arrived at that place, but the reason for that inner turmoil were beginning to change. My father's attitude towards me was becoming harder to process. At first, I was simply being disgusted by his over-familiarity. But by that point, it was harder to dismiss as some bizarre game. Sometimes, I could almost take his friendliness at face value. Even that remark about my hair might be intended as nothing more than a casual compliment. Such positive interpretations were beginning to seem plausible.
そんなの、今更よ。
I tried mumbling negative words to myself, but the nagging doubts remained. My distant mother had grown kind and her condition improved. The situation was clearly different, but there was always a possibility my father had undergone a similar change in the years since I'd seen him last. Tossing and turning in my bed, I turned the questions over in my mind. I'd been so cold for so long, but little by little, I could feel something like warmth returning to my body. I would just end up being betrayed again. This time would be different, with two opposite answers battling indecisively in my mind. I wait for the dawn to come. Come on, not another flashback. How long the flashback gonna take? 2 months after my return to Tokyo, my life was beginning to change even outside of the house. School didn't seem particularly unpleasant anymore. It was so difficult to be alone in that place. Once you got used to it. So long as I quietly attended my classes, the entire day would pass easily enough. I never disliked study, so once my mood took a turn for better, it didn't feel like wasted time. The changes in the season had brought more period of clear weather. I resumed my habit of drawing on a daily basis, and as my mind grew calm, my art slowly began to change as well. My perspective, pointing each straight up for so long, began to creep downward. Every once in a while, I do include a town scale or two among my sketches. It wasn't exactly principle to me of me be finding enjoyment in that life, but there's now no point sulking forever. My sudden feelings of self-reproach slowly faded. I began to look at the world around me more calmly.
お帰りなさいませ。
ただいま。
Even those brutally awkward interactions with the household employees had gotten more tolerable with the passage of time. After a few weeks, they picked up on my non-reaction and began to tone down their aggressive approach. They would gradually back off after letting me know they were available if I need them. The arrangement was much more comfortable for me. By then, I actually was asking them for something every once in a while.
今日は部屋へすぐ戻られますか？ええ、そのようにします。かしこまりました。
After asking the maid to have someone call me when it was time for dinner, I returned to my room. Sitting down in front of my desk, I thought back over for the last few months. My attitudes towards that new life were beginning to soften in many ways. The one exception, I would stubbornly continue to keep my father's at arm's length. His behavior had to change. He continued to treat me kindly all the while. Notice that I offered him nothing but brief, monosyllable answers, vaguely avoiding his questions. That had seemed only natural at first. What else could you expect after how he treated my mother? After abandoning me for years, that resentment seems to justify my behavior. But months has passed, and I just couldn't see any sign of the cruel man I thought he was, at least not when he was interacting with me. Nearly every night, I rejected his gentle attempt to draw me into conversation. My father didn't seem to be letting that bother him, but I was beginning to feel increasingly guilt about my attitude.
どうしたらいいのかしら。
I threw the question up at my ceiling, knowing all too well that no answer would be forthcoming. It would be time for dinner soon. For very different reasons than before, I started to find that sometimes somewhat painful.
今日も由美子の話題が出てな。榊さんのお嬢さんは可愛くて聡明でいらっしゃると目黒医大の先生もおっしゃってたよ。
はい。
由美子がこんなにいい子に育って父さんも嬉しいよ、本当に。
This man had interacted with me as something close to an ideal father for 2 straight months. That day, as always, all that came out of his mouth were words of praise and concern for me. Uneasy feelings smoldering away quietly inside my chest.
なあ、由美子。
My father spoke to me in a kind tone of voice. I couldn't notice his gaze. I found myself hanging my head.
由美子。
I didn't dislike being praised, not at all. He was making time in an extremely busy life for me. I wasn't yet cynical enough to dismiss that. Sometimes I feel myself on the verge of being grateful.
ごめんなさい。
But no, not yet. That black grin was still inside me. There was always that other emotion struggling against my guilt. So long as that remained, I would never allow myself to get any closer to my father.
母さんのことか。
Finally, I felt myself twitch with surprise. Until that particular point, I had deliberately steered clear of that particular topic. I assumed my father was intentionally avoiding it as well, so the turn of the conversation came as a real shock.
話して良いものかずっと迷っていたが、ちゃんと話さないと由美子も納得してはくれないということなんだろうな。
Finally.
そんな。私は。
いいんだ。これは父さんが悪かったんだ。
My father slowly begins to speak. He spoke about his feeling towards my mother, how he felt when she left, and behind everything, the constant stress his increasingly incredibly demanding job had placed on their marriage. Everything my father told me turned my image of him completely on his head.
二人が出て行った時、本当に辛かったよ。連れ戻しに行こうって何度も思った。でも仕事に追われてそれができなかった。
In time, my increasingly isolated father began to seek comfort. He admitted that the affair described in the magazine article had happened at that time.
父さんも寂しかったんだ。会社でもいろいろとあって、いけないことと知りつつも、母さんを裏切るようなことをしてしまった。
In other words, you are a selfish man.
雑誌に記事が出たと聞いたとき、一番に考えたのは、母さんを巻き込んではいけないということだったんだ。それで弁護士を向かわせたんだが。
But it's too late. It was consistent. The actions that had seemed so inhumanly cruel at that time could also be explained by my father's story. After all, that lawyer never got a chance to speak with my mother. There was no proof he'd been sent to serve her with divorce papers. But even so,
由美子。
My father looked straight at my face from across the table. I couldn't help myself. I returned his gaze. At some point, I do forgot even to avert my eyes.
お父さんを許してくれないか。
No. It was a gentle voice. I began to think that I would have never heard a voice like that ever again from anyone. And yet it was coming to me from him, the person who accepted in the ways I always wanted most.
私。
Watashi? Many thoughts flooded into my head in a confused jumble. Those words were more than powerful enough. My fragile defensive wife finally sprung a leak.
ごめんなさい。
由美子。
ごめんなさい、お父さん。ちょっと、私。
I stood from my chair, turned away from that corner of here, and hurried out to the hallway. I was covering my face with my right eye. I stumbled out to the stairs as best as I could. On the way out, I caught a glimpse of someone staring at me in shock, but I wasn't composed enough to pay that any. I was growing hazy before I even reached my floor. We got a good scene here, guys. We got a good scene here. And instead, I closed the door to my room behind me. The tears came pouring down my face. One drop stented the ivory carpet beneath my feet, then another.
お父さん、あんなこと。
It It was hard to understand. Accurate rings concealed the man with the vicious smile of people the magazine described. There were so many things about him that confused me. But I couldn't believe he spoke those words for sure. It sounded as if they had come from the heart. Just as Mom had come to regret the cruel things he said to me. Perhaps Dad was simply trying to make up for his mistake. Looking at it from the angle, it would be so hard to accept his apology.
いいのかな。ねえ、お母さん。
And she looking at her mother's photo. I had one photograph of my mother left, saving the memory of my mobile phone. But as always, her face was turned to the side. I couldn't read expression.
今度こそ幸せになっても。
My life had been shades of grey for very long. Little by little, I could see colors beginning to emerge. It was a pleasant feeling. A certain place. When this is going to end? The air was still a little cold, but the sky that day was remarkably beautiful. Putting down my brush, I stretched out and muttered a few words to no one in particular.
今日はこのぐらいにしておこうかしら。
Recently, I've been getting so absorbed in my arts that it was easy to forget the time. There were a few incidents where I kept my car waiting long enough to cause anxiety, so I started making a conscious effort to check my watch frequently. And the episode here, my friend, and the episode here. Thank you for watching my video. My video are just for fun. Don't take harm, brothers and sisters. Sisters.
セーブするわ。
Magic word time. Adios e famosa. Okay, we're gonna save like this time.